In 1913, Argentina was richer than France or Germany, almost twice as prosperous as Spain, and its per capita GDP was nearly as high as Canada's. In the lead up to World War I, the Argentine GDP was surging at 6% annually. That's the fastest growth rate recorded anywhere on the planet at the time. Argentina was among the planet's top 10 wealthiest nations. Immigrants flooded in from Europe, chasing opportunity and fleeing the war. Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina, was considered the Paris of South America. Argentina had its own South American dream. And then came a century of big government. Beginning in the 1930s, Argentina's economy began deteriorating rapidly as unsustainable government spending and over-reliance on commodity exports fueled a cycle of boom and bust. It is by far one of the sharpest declines of a formerly rich country in history. There's not really many countries to consider it to that didn't suffer a full-blown collapse. Between 1975 and 1990 alone, real per capita income fell by more than 20%, wiping out nearly 3 decades of development. I want you to imagine that. Imagine if just in 15 years, you were making 20% less than you were today. Starting in 1975, inflation averaged more than 300% per year all the way through 1991. That led to prices increasing by a 20 billion X. Your money became worthless year after year. Every single peso that you saved would lose 3 times its value per year. And this is what led to Javier Milei being elected in late 2023. The country had been in the grips of poverty for so long. They had been lied to by socialists and big government advocates who said that more government was the answer. For the 2023 election, where Javier Milei was elected, inflation had reached over 140% at the start of the year, and then accelerated to 211% by December of that year. Nearly 42% of Argentinians were living in poverty when Javier Milei took office. Income per capita had fallen to just 43% of what it was in 1913, when Argentina was one of the richest nations. A country that had once fed the world with its beef, a country that immigrants crossed the Atlantic Ocean to reach, had been reduced to nothing, had been reduced to a developing nation that had poverty everywhere, all due to bad government. So what happens when a country finally decides it has enough? What happens when they elect a man who doesn't want to manage the decline, but actually blow it up entirely? That's what we're here to talk about. The rise of Javier Milei, the first elected libertarian in the Southern Hemisphere. At the start of 2024, when Javier Milei first took office, monthly inflation was running at 25%, meaning every 2 months, 1 peso lost half its value. The year-over-year money supply growth was at nearly 200%. They were printing 2 times the amount of money they currently had every single year, all to run a massive physical deficit. The government spending was far more than they ever collected in revenue, and it all had to be funded by increasing inflation and printing more money. So what Milei actually did was something radical, something unheard of here in America. He actually slashed public spending. He cut the number of government industries by more than half, and he laid off tens of thousands of public workers. By March of 2024, just a couple of months into his term, Argentina recorded its first physical surplus in a generation. Argentina went from a deficit of roughly 3% of GDP to a projected surplus of around 2%. That's a swing of nearly 5 points. He also decreed that state-owned enterprises and factories could be privatized. He loosened labor laws. He stripped away hundreds of regulations. He didn't just sort of tinker with things or fudge a few numbers. In his own words, he wanted to take a chainsaw to the government. And that's actually what he did. But with that, I will be honest. There is some pain with that. There is some growing pains when you have to do sort of shock economics. Poverty spiked to 53% in the first half of 2024. That is up from the 42% at the end of 2023 when he first took office. Subsidies for gas and electricity were cut, food costs rose, and public sector workers lost their jobs, which of course contributed to the spike in poverty rates. But that's to be expected. Real liberty isn't painless. You cannot just undo decades of bad policy for free. But there was a payoff to that because Argentinians held the line. In May 2025, consumer prices rose just 1.5%. That was the lowest monthly figure in 5 years. And that's down from the 25.5% inflation rate they had when he took office. Poverty also went down drastically. It tumbled to just 32%. That's the lowest since 2018. And that is a pre-COVID economic world that we're comparing it to. Argentina's economy also posted 7.6% year-over-year growth in quarter 2 of 2025. Its strongest in nearly 2 decades. This was fueled by the massive deregulation, the spending cuts, and the loosening of currency controls. We can look at Milei and see how deregulation works in real time. After Milei repealed rent control laws, the supply of rental housing in Buenos Aires jumped 195%, nearly 200%, and the median asking price fell roughly by 10%, as apartments and housing finally returned to the market since they were no longer beholden to these very dirty, schemy rent control laws. Argentina also posted a record $19 billion trade surplus. That is a dramatic reversal from the decades of external imbalance where they were importing a lot more than they ever traded. And he secured another political mandate. In 2025, during the midterm elections, his party secured 41% of the vote and doubled his congressional representation. So the people actually understood and listened. They gave him a chance to prove that his economics and his policies would work. I think the takeaway from Javier Milei is that economic freedom, in practice, works a bit differently than the people who just write think tank white papers about it. In real time, in a real country, we have proof that the free market works when you actually let it work. Physical discipline produces a surplus. It does not just produce suffering. Deregulation increases supplies and lowers prices. This is exactly what Econ 101 at any college would teach you, but for some reason the American government can still not figure it out. The real cruelty was not Javier Milei and his brand of libertarianism. The real cruelty was decades of interventionism that made the economy the time bomb that it was. Critics often said that Milei would destroy Argentina. When he first became elected, there was a huge number of economists who came out and said that he was going to destroy the country and it would not work. Instead, he proved them wrong and proved what libertarians have been saying for decades, that free market works and government dependency hurts. Argentina is proof of the free market concept. Now, if only current leaders in the American administration could take note of this. Ultimately, what Javier is doing is great for Argentina and great for the world. But we need to take these lessons and get them done in America, in Europe, across the world. We need a free market revolution to unleash prosperity and good times for all. This is all I have. If you enjoy what I said, if this made you learn something, please like and subscribe. I have been the Anti-Federalist.